Chapter 1. I was coming home from school with my mother. She was holding my hand. In the other hand, I clutched my turkey, the ones we made in first grade the week before Thanksgiving. I was so proud of mine, I was practically shitting nickels. What you did see was put your hand on a piece of construction paper and then trace around it with a crayon. That made the tail and body. When it came to the head, you were on your own. I showed mine to Mom, and she's all, yeah, right. Totally great. But I don't think she ever really saw it. She was probably thinking about one of the books she was trying to sell. Flogging the product, she called it. Mom was a literary agency. It used to be her brother, my Uncle Harry, but Mom took over his business a year before the time I'm telling you about. It's a long story and kind of a bummer. I said, I used forest green because it's my favorite color. You knew that, right? We were almost to our building by then. It was only 3 blocks from my school. She's all, yeah. Also, you play or watch Barney and the Magic School Bus when we get home, kiddo. I've got like a zillion calls to make. So I go, yeah, which earned me a poke and a grin. I loved it when I could make my mother grin, because even at 6, I knew that she took the world very serious. Later on, I found out part of the reason was me. She thought she might be raising a crazy kid. The day I'm telling you about was the one when she decided for sure I wasn't crazy after all. Which must have been sort of a relief and sort of not. You don't talk to anybody about this, she said to me later that day. Except to me. And maybe not even me, kiddo. Okay? I said, okay. When you're little and it's your mom, you say okay to everything. Unless she says it's bedtime, of course. Or to finish your broccoli. We got to our building and the elevator was still broken. You could say things might have been different if it had been working, but I don't think so. I think that people who say life is all about the choices we make and the roads we go down are full of shit. Because check it, stairs or elevator, we still would have come out on the 3rd floor. When the fickle finger of fate points at you, all roads lead to the same place. That's what I think. I may change my mind when I'm older, but I really don't think so. Fuck this elevator, Mom said. Then, you didn't hear that, kiddo. Hear what? I said, which got me another grin. Last grin for her that afternoon, I can tell you. I asked her if she wanted me to carry her bag, which had a manuscript in it like always. That day a big one, looked like a 500-pager. Mom always sat on a bench reading while she waited for me to get out of school, if the weather was nice. She said, sweet offer, but what do I always tell you? You have to tote your own burden in life, I said. Correctamundo. Is it Regis Thomas? I asked. Yes, indeed. Good old Regis, who pays our rent. Is it about Roanoke? Do you even have to ask, Jamie? Which made me snicker. Everything good old Regis wrote was about Roanoke. That was the burden he toted in life. We went up the stairs to the 3rd floor, where there were 2 other apartments plus ours at the end of the hall. Ours was the fanciest one. Mr. and Mrs. Burkett were standing outside 3A, and I knew right away something was wrong because Mr. Burkett was smoking a cigarette, which I hadn't seen him do before and was illegal in our building anyway. His eyes were bloodshot and his hair was all crazied up in gray spikes. I always called him Mr., but he was actually Professor Burkett and taught something smart at NYU. English and European literature, I later found out. Mrs. Burkett was dressed in a nightgown and her feet were bare. That nightgown was pretty thin. I could see most of her stuff right through it. My mother said, Marty, what's wrong? Before he could say anything back, I showed him my turkey. Because he looked sad and I wanted to cheer him up, but also because I was so proud of it. Look, Mr. Burkett, I made a turkey. Look, Mrs. Burkett. I held it up for her in front of my face because I didn't want her to think I was looking at her stuff. Mr. Burkett paid no attention. I don't think he even heard me. Tia, I have some awful news. Mona died this morning. My mother dropped her bag with the manuscript inside it between her feet and put her hand over her mouth. Oh no, tell me that's not true. He began to cry. She got up in the night and said she wanted a drink of water. I went back to sleep, and she was on the couch this morning with a comforter pulled up to her chin, and so I tiptoed to the kitchen and put on the coffee because I thought the pleasant smell would wake. He really broke down. Then. Mom took him in her arms the way she did me when I hurt myself, even though Mr. Burkett was about 174, I found out later. That was when Mrs. Burkett spoke to me. She was hard to hear, but not as hard as some of them, because she was still pretty fresh. She said, "Turkeys aren't green, James." "Well, mine is," I said. My mother was still holding Mr. Burkett and kind of rocking him. They didn't hear her because they couldn't, and they didn't hear me because they were doing adult things, comforting for Mom, blubbering for Mr. Burkett. Mr. Burkett said, "I called Dr. Allen and he came and said she probably had a soak." At least that's what I thought he said. He was crying so much it was hard to tell. He called the funeral parlor. They took her away. I don't know what I'll do without her. Mrs. Burkett said, "My husband is going to burn your mother's hair with his cigarette if he doesn't look out." And sure enough, he did. I could smell the singeing hair, a kind of beauty shop smell. Mom was too polite to say anything about it, but she made him let go of her, and then she took the cigarette from him and dropped it on the floor and stepped on it. I thought that was a grody thing to do, extreme litter bugging, but I didn't say anything. I got that it was a special situation. I also knew that talking to Mrs. Burkett anymore would freak him out. Mom, too. Even a little kid knows certain basic things if he's not soft in the attic. You said please, you said thank you didn't flap your weenie around in public or chew with your mouth open, and you didn't talk to dead folks when they were standing next to living folks who were just starting to miss them. I only want to say, in my own defense, that when I saw her, I didn't know she was dead. Later on, I got better at telling the difference, but back then, I was just learning. It was her nightgown I could see through, not her. Dead people look just like living people, except they're always wearing the clothes they died in. Meanwhile, Mr. Burkett was rehashing the whole thing. He told my mother how he sat on the floor beside the couch and held his wife's hand till that doctor guy came, and again till the mortician guy came to take her away. "Conveyed her hence," was what he actually said, which I didn't understand, until Mom explained it to me. And at first I thought he said beautician, maybe because of the smell when he burned Mom's hair. His crying had tapered off, but now it ramped up again. "Her rings are gone," he said through his tears. "Both her wedding ring and her engagement ring, that big diamond. I looked on the night table by her side of the bed, where she puts them when she rubs that awful smelling arthritis cream into her hands. It does smell bad," Mrs. Burkett admitted. "Lanolin is basically sheep dip, but it really helps." I nodded to show I understood, but didn't say anything. "And on the bathroom sink because sometimes she leaves them there. I've looked everywhere." "They'll turn up," my mother soothed, and now that her hair was safe, she took Mr. Burkett in her arms again. "They'll turn up, Marty. Don't you worry about that." "I miss her so much. I miss her already." Mrs. Burkett flapped a hand in front of her face. "I give him 6 weeks before he's asking Dolores Magowan out to lunch." Mr. Burkett was blubbing, and my mother was doing her soothing thing, like she did to me whenever I scraped my knee, or this one time when I tried to make her a cup of tea and slopped hot water on my hand. Lots of noise, in other words, so I took a chance but kept my voice low. "Where are your rings, Mrs. Burkett? Do you know?" "They have to tell you the truth when they're dead. I didn't know that at the age of 6. I just assumed all grown-ups told the truth, living or dead. Of course, back then, I also believed Goldilocks was a real girl. Call me stupid if you want to. At least I didn't believe the 3 bears actually talked." "Top shelf of the hall closet," she said. "Way in the back, behind the scrapbooks." "Why there?" I asked, and my mother gave me a strange look. As far as she could see, I was talking to the empty doorway, although by then she knew I wasn't quite the same as other kids. "After a thing that happened in Central Park. Not a nice thing. I'll get to it. I overheard her telling one of her editor friends on the phone that I was Faye. That scared the shit out of me, because I thought she meant she was changing my name to Faye, which is a girl's name. I don't have the slightest idea, Mrs. Burkett said. By then, I suppose I was having the stroke. My thoughts would have been drowning in blood. Thoughts drowning in blood. I never forgot that. Mom asked Mr. Burkett if he wanted to come down to our apartment for a cup of tea, or something stronger. But he said no. He was going to have another hunt for his wife's missing rings. She asked him if he would like us to bring him some Chinese takeout, which my mother was planning for dinner. And he said that would be good, thank you, Tia. My mother said de nada, which she used almost as much as yeah, and right. Then said we'd bring it to his apartment around 6, unless he wanted to eat with us in ours, which he was welcome to do. He said no, he'd like to eat in his place, but he would like us to eat with him. Except what he actually said was our place, like Mrs. Burkett was still alive. Which she wasn't, even though she was there. By then, you'll have found her. Rings, Mom said. She took my hand. Come on, Jamie. We'll see Mr. Burkett later, but for now, let's leave him alone. Mrs. Burkett said, Turkeys aren't green, Jamie, and that doesn't look like a turkey anyway. It looks like a blob with fingers sticking out of it. You're no Rembrandt. Dead people have to tell the truth, which is okay when you want to know the answer to a question. But as I said, the truth can really suck. I started to be mad at her, but just then she started to cry and I couldn't be. She turned to Mr. Burkett and said, Who'll make sure you don't miss the belt loop in the back of your pants now? Dolores Magowan? I should smile and kiss. A pig. She kissed his cheek, or kissed at it. I couldn't really tell which. I loved you, Marty. Still do. Mr. Burkett raised his hand and scratched the spot where her lips had touched him, as if he had an itch. I suppose that's what he thought it was. Chapter 2. So yeah, I see dead people. As far as I can remember, I always have. But it's not. Like in that movie with Bruce Willis. It can be interesting. It can be scary sometimes, the Central Park dude. It can be a pain in the ass, but mostly, it just is. Like being left-handed, or being able to play classical music when you're like 3 years old, or getting early onset Alzheimer's, which is what happened to Uncle Harry when he was only 42. At age 6, 42 seemed old to me. But even then I understood it's young to wind up not knowing who you are, or what the names of things are. For some reason, that's what always scared me the most when we went to see Uncle Harry. His thoughts didn't drown in blood from a busted brain vessel, but they drowned, just the same. Mom and me trucked on, down to 3C, and Mom let us in, which took some time because there are 3 locks on the door. She said that's the price you pay for living in style. We had a 6-room apartment with a view of the avenue. Mom called it the Palace on Park. We had a cleaning woman who came in twice a week. Mom had a Range Rover in the parking garage on 2nd Avenue, and sometimes we went up to Uncle Harry's place in Spionk. Thanks to Regis Thomas and a few other writers, but mostly good old Regis, we were living high on the hog. It didn't. Last, a depressing development I will discuss all too soon. Looking back on it, I sometimes think my life was like a Dickens novel, only with swearing. Mom tossed her manuscript bag and purse on the sofa and sat down. The sofa made a farting noise that usually made us laugh, but not that day. Jesus fuck, Mom said, then raised a hand in a stop gesture. You? I didn't hear it. Nope, I said. Good. I need to have an electric shock collar or something that buzzes every time I swear around you. That'd teach me. She stuck out her lower lip and blew back her bangs. I've got another 200 pages of Regis's latest too. Read. What's this one called? I asked, knowing the title would have of Roanoke in it. They always did. Ghost Maiden of Roanoke, she said. It's one of his better ones, lots of sea, lots of kissing and hugging. I wrinkled my nose. Sorry, kiddo, but the ladies love those pounding hearts and torrid thighs. She looked at the bag with Ghost Maiden of Roanoke inside, secured, with the usual 6 or 8 rubber bands, one of which always snapped and made Mom give out some of her best swears. many of which I still use. Now I feel like I don't want to do anything but have a glass of wine. Maybe the whole bottle. Mona Burkett was a prize pain in the ass. He might actually be better off without her, but right now he's gutted. I hope. To God, he's got relatives, because I don't relish the idea of being comforter-in-chief. She loved him too, I said. Mom gave me a strange look. Yeah? You think? I know. She said something mean about my turkey, but then she cried and kissed him on the cheek. You imagined that, James, she said, but half-heartedly. She knew better by then, I'm sure she did. But grown-ups have a tough time believing. And I'll tell you why. When they find out as kids that Santa Claus is a fake and Goldilocks isn't a real girl and the Easter Bunny is bullshit, just 3 examples, I could give more, it makes a complex, and they stop believing anything. They can't see for themselves. Nope, didn't imagine it. She said I'd never be Rembrandt. Who is that? An artist, she said, and blew her bangs back again. I don't know why she didn't just cut them or wear her hair a different way, which she could, because she was really pretty. When we go down there to eat, don't you dare say anything to Mr. Burkett about what you think you saw. I won't, I said, but she was right. My turkey sucks. I felt bad about that. I guess it showed because she held out her arms. Come here, kiddo. I came and hugged her. Your turkey is beautiful. It's the most beautiful turkey I ever saw. I'm going to put it up on the refrigerator, and it will stay there forever. I hugged as tight as I could and put my face in the hollow of her shoulder so I could smell her perfume. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Jamie, 1,000,000 bunches. Now go play or watch TV. I need to roll some calls before ordering the Chinese. Okay. I started for my room, then stopped. She put her rings on the top shelf of the hall closet behind some scrapbooks. My mother stared at me with her mouth open. Why would she do that? I asked her, and she said she didn't know. She said by then her thoughts were drowning in blood. Oh my God, Mom whispered and put her hand to her neck. You should figure out a way to tell him when we have the Chinese. Then he won't worry about it. Can I have General Tso's? Yes, she said, and brown rice, not white. Right, I said, and went to play with my Legos. I was making a robot. Chapter 3. The Burkett's apartment was smaller than ours, but nice. After dinner, while we were having our fortune cookies, mine said a feather in the hand is better than a bird in the air, which makes no sense at all. Mom said, Have you checked the closets, Marty? For her rings, I mean? Why would she put her rings in a closet? A sensible enough question. Well, if she was having a stroke, she might not have been thinking too clearly. We were eating at the little round table in the kitchen nook. Mrs. Burkett was sitting on one of the stools at the counter and nodded vigorously when Mom said that. Maybe I'll check, Mr. Burkett said. He sounded pretty vague. Right now, I'm too tired and upset. You check the bedroom closet when you get around to it, Mom said. I'll check the one in the hall right now. A little stretching. Will do me good after all that sweet and sour pork. Mrs. Burkett said, Did she think that up all by herself? I didn't know she was that smart. Already she was getting hard to hear. After a while, I wouldn't be able to hear her at all. Just see her mouth moving, like she was behind a thick pane of glass. Pretty soon after that, she'd be gone. My mom's plenty smart, I said. Never said she wasn't, Mr. Burkett said. But if she finds those rings in the front hall closet, I'll eat my hat. Just then, my mother said, Bingo, and came in with the rings on the palm of one outstretched hand. The wedding ring was pretty ordinary, but the engagement ring was as big as an eyeball. A real sparkler. Oh my God, Mr. Burkett cried. How in God's name? I prayed to St. Anthony, Mom said, but cast a quick glance my way, and a smile. Tony, come around. Something's lost that must be found. And as you see, it worked. I thought about asking Mr. Burkett if he wanted salt and pepper on his hat, but didn't. It wasn't the right time to be funny, and besides, It's like my mother always says, nobody loves a smartass. Chapter 4. The funeral was 3 days later. It was my first one, and interesting, but not what you'd call fun. At least my mother didn't have to be comforter-in-chief. Mr. Burkett had a sister and brother to take care of that. They were old, but not as old as he was. Mr. Burkett cried all the way through the service, and the sister kept handing him Kleenex. Her purse seemed to be full of them. I'm surprised she had room for anything else. That night, Mom and I had pizza from Domino's. She had wine, and I had Kool-Aid as a special treat for being good at the funeral. When we were down to the last piece of the pie, she asked me if I thought Mrs. Burkett had been there. Yeah, she was sitting on the steps leading up to the place where the minister and her friends talked. The pulpit. Could you? She picked up the last slice, looked at it, then put it down and looked at me. Could you see through her? Like a movie ghost, you mean? Yes, I suppose that is what I mean. Nope. She was all there, but still in her nightgown. I was surprised to see her because she died 3 days ago. They don't usually last that long. They just disappear? Like she was trying to get it straight in her mind. I could tell she didn't like talking about it, but I was glad she was. It was a relief. Yeah. What was she doing? Jamie? Just sitting there. Once or twice she looked at her coffin, but mostly she looked at him. At Mr. Burkett. Marty. Right. She said something once, but I couldn't hear. Pretty soon after they die, their voices start to fade away, like turning down the music on the car radio. After a while, you can't hear them at all. And then they're gone. Yes, I said. There was a lump in my throat, so I drank the rest of my Kool-Aid to make it go away. Gone. Help me clean up, she said. Then we can watch an episode of Torchwood, if you want. Yeah, cool. In my opinion, Torchwood wasn't really cool, but getting to stay up an hour after my usual bedtime was way cool. Fine. Just as long as you understand we're not going to make a practice of it. But I need to tell you something first, and it's very serious, so I want you to pay attention. Close attention. Okay. She got down on one knee, so our faces were more or less level, and took hold of me by the shoulders, gently but firmly. Never tell anyone about seeing dead people, James. Never. They wouldn't believe me anyway. You never used to. I believed something, she said. Ever since that day in Central Park. Do you remember that? She blew back her bangs. Of course you do. How could you forget? I remember. I only wished I didn't. She was still on her knee, looking into my eyes. So here it is. People not believing is a good thing, but someday somebody might. And that might get the wrong kind of talk going, or put you in actual danger. Why? There's an old saying that dead men tell no tales, Jamie, but they can talk to you, can't they? Dead men and women. You say they have to answer questions and give truthful answers, as if dying is like a dose of sodium pentothal. I had no clue what that was, and she must have seen it on my face because she said to never mind that, but to remember what Mrs. Burkett had told me when I asked about her rings. So? I said. I liked being close to my mom, but I didn't like her looking at me in that intense way. Those rings were valuable, especially the engagement ring. People die with secrets, Jamie, and there are always people who want to know those secrets. I don't mean to scare you, but sometimes a scare is the only lesson that works. Like the man in Central Park was a lesson about being careful in traffic and always wearing your helmet when you were on your bike, I thought, but didn't say. I won't talk about it, I said. Not ever, except to me, if you need to. Okay, good. We have an understanding. She got up and we went in the living room and watched TV. When the show was over, I brushed my teeth and peed and washed my hands. Mom tucked me in and kissed me and said what she always said. Sweet dreams, pleasant repose, all the bed and all the clothes. Most nights that was the last time I saw her until morning. I'd hear the clink of glass as she poured herself a second glass of wine, or a third. Then Jazz turned way down low as she started reading some manuscript. Only I guess moms must have an extra sense, because that night she came back in and sat on my bed. Or maybe she just heard me crying, although I was trying my best to keep it on the down low. Because, as she also always said, it's better to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. "What's wrong, Jamie?" she asked, brushing back my hair. "Are you thinking about the funeral? Or Mrs. Burkett being there?" "What? Would happen to me if you died, Mom? Would I have to go live in an orphanage home? Because it sure as shit wouldn't be with Uncle Harry." "Of course not," Mom said, still brushing my hair. "And it's what we call a moot point, Jamie, because I'm not going to die for a long time. I'm 35 years old, and that means I still have over half my life ahead of me. What if you get what Uncle Harry's got and have to live in that place with him?" The tears were streaming down my face. Having her stroke my forehead made me feel better, but it also made me cry more. Who knows why? "That place smells bad. It smells like pee." The chance of that happening is so teensy that if you put it next to an ant, the ant would look like Godzilla, she said. That made me smile and feel better. Now that I'm older, I know she was either lying or misinformed, but the gene that triggers what Uncle Harry had, early onset Alzheimer's, swerved around her, thank God. I'm not going to die. You're not going to die, and I think there's a good chance that this peculiar ability of yours will fade when you get older. So, are we good? We're good. No more tears, Jamie. Just sweet dreams and pleasant repose, all the bed and all the clothes, I finished. Yeah. She kissed my forehead and left, leaving the door open a little bit, as she always did. I didn't want to tell her it wasn't the funeral that had made me cry, and it wasn't Mrs. Burkett either, because she wasn't scary. Most of them aren't. But the bicycle man in Central Park scared the shit out of me. He was gooshy. Chapter 5. We were on the 86th Street Transverse, heading for Wave Hill in the Bronx, where one of my preschool friends was having a big birthday party. Talk about spoiling a kid rotten, Mom said. I had my present to give Lily in my lap. We went around a curve and saw a bunch of people standing in the street. The accident must have just happened. A man was lying half on the pavement and half on the sidewalk with a twisted-up bicycle beside him. Someone had put a jacket over his top half. His bottom half was wearing black bike shorts with red stripes up the sides and a knee brace and sneakers with blood all over them. It was on his socks and legs, too. We could hear approaching sirens. Standing next to him was the same man in the same bike shorts and knee brace. He had white hair with blood in it. His face was caved in right down the middle, I think maybe from where he hit the curb. His nose was like in two pieces, and so was his mouth. Cars were stopping, and my mother said, "Close your eyes." It was the man lying on the ground she was looking at, of course. "He's dead," I started to cry. "That man is dead." We stopped. We had to. Because of the other cars in front of us. "No, he's not," Mom said. "He's asleep, that's all. It's what happens sometimes when someone gets banged hard. He'll be fine. Now close your eyes." I didn't. The smashed-up man raised a hand and waved at me. They know when I see them. They always do. "His face is in two pieces." Mom looked again to be sure, saw the man was covered down to his waist, and said, "Stop scaring yourself, Jamie. Just close your..." "He's there," I pointed. My finger was trembling. Everything was trembling. Right there, standing next to himself. That scared her. I could tell by the way her mouth got all tight. She laid on her horn with one hand. With the other, she pushed the button that rolled down her window and started waving at the cars ahead of her. "Go!" she shouted. "Move! Stop staring at him, for Christ's sake! This isn't a fucking movie!" They did, except for the one right in front of her. That guy was leaning over and taking a picture with his phone. Mom pulled up and bumped his fender. He gave her the bird. My mother backed up and pulled into the other lane to go around. I wish I'd also given him the bird, but I was too freaked out. Mom barely missed a police car coming the other way and drove for the far side of the park as fast as she could. She was almost there when I unbuckled my seatbelt. Mom yelled at me not to do that, but I did it anyway and buzzed down my window and kneeled on the seat and leaned out and blew groceries all down the side of the car. I couldn't help it. When we got to the Central Park West side, Mom pulled over and wiped off my face with the sleeve of her blouse. She might have worn that blouse again, but if she did, I don't remember it. God, Jamie, you're white as a sheet. I couldn't help it, I said. I never saw anyone like that before. There were bones sticking right out of his no-nose. Then I ralphed again, but managed to get most of that one on the street instead of on our car. Plus, there wasn't as much. She stroked my neck, ignoring someone, maybe the man who gave us the finger, who honked at us and drove around our car. Honey, that's just your imagination. He was covered up. Not the one on the ground. The one standing beside him. He waved at me. She stared at me for a long time, seemed like she was going to say something, then just buckled my seatbelt. I think maybe we should skip the party. How does that sound to you? Good, I said. I don't like Lily anyway. She sneaky pinches me during story time. We went home. Mom asked me if I could keep down a cup of cocoa, and I said I could. We drank cocoa together in the living room. I still had Lily's present. It was a little doll in a sailor suit. When I gave it to Lily the next week, instead of sneaky pinching me, she gave me a kiss right on the mouth. I got teased about that and never minded a bit. While we were drinking our cocoa, she might have put a little something extra in hers, Mom said, I promised myself when I was pregnant that I'd never lie to my kid, so here goes. Yeah, that guy was probably dead. She paused. No, he was dead. I don't think even a bike helmet would have saved him, and I didn't see one. No, he wasn't wearing a helmet. Because if he'd been wearing it when he got hit, it was a taxi that did it, we found out. He would have been wearing it as he stood beside his body. They're always wearing what they had on when they died. But you only imagined you saw. His face, honey, you couldn't have. Someone covered him up with a jacket, someone very kind. He was wearing a t-shirt with a lighthouse on it, I said. Then I thought of something else. It was only a little bit cheery, but after something like that, I guess you take what you can get. At least he was pretty old. Why do you say that? She was looking at me oddly. Looking back on it, I think that was when she started to believe, at least a little bit. His hair was white, except for the parts with the blood in it, that is. I started to cry again. My mother hugged me and rocked me, and I went to sleep while she was doing it. I tell you what, there's nothing like having a mother around when you're thinking of scary shit. We got the Times delivered to our door. My mother usually read it at the table in her bathrobe while we ate breakfast. But the day after the Central Park man, she was reading one of her manuscripts instead. When breakfast was over, she told me to get dressed, and maybe we'd ride the Circle Line, so it must have been a Saturday. I remember thinking it was the first weekend the Central Park man was dead in. That made it real all over again. I did what she said, but first I went into her bedroom while she was in the shower. The newspaper was on the bed, open to the page where they put dead folks who are famous enough for the Times. The picture of the Central Park man was there. His name was Robert Harrison. At 4, I was already reading at a 3rd grade level. My mother was very proud of that, and there were no tough words in the headline of the story, which was all I read. CEO of Lighthouse Foundation dies in traffic accident. I saw a few more dead people after that. The saying about how in life we are in death is truer than most people know. And sometimes I said something to Mom, but mostly I didn't because I could see it upset her. It wasn't until Mrs. Burkett died and Mom found her rings in the closet that we really talked about it again. That night, after she left my room, I thought I wouldn't be able to sleep. And if I did, I would dream about the Central Park man with his split-open face and bones sticking out of his nose, or about my mother in her coffin, but also sitting on the steps to the pulpit, where only I could see her. But so far as I can remember, I didn't dream about anything. I got up the next morning feeling good, and Mom was feeling good, and we joked around like we sometimes did, and she stuck my turkey on the fridge and then put a big smackaroo on it, which made me giggle, and she walked me to school, and Mrs. Tate told us about dinosaurs, and life went on for 2 years in the good ways it usually did. Until, that is, everything fell apart.
Chapter 6. When Mom realized how bad things were, I heard her talking to Ann Staley, her editor friend, about Uncle Harry on the phone. Mom said, "He was soft even before he went soft." I realize that now. At 6 I wouldn't have had a clue. But by then I was 8 going on 9, and I understood, at least partly. She was talking about the mess her brother had gotten himself and her into even before the early onset Alzheimer's carried off his brains like a thief in the night. That I agreed with her, of course. She was my mother, and it was us against the world, a team of 2. I hated Uncle Harry for the jam we were in. It wasn't until later, when I was 12 or maybe even 14, that I realized me mother was also partly to blame. She might have been able to get out while there was still time, probably could have, but she didn't. Like Uncle Harry, who founded the Conklin Literary Agency, she knew a lot about books but not enough about money. She even got 2 warnings. One was from her friend Liz Dutton. Liz was an NYPD detective and a great fan of Regis Thomas's Roanoke series. Mom met her at a launch party for one of those books, and they clicked, which turned out to be not so good. I'll get to it, but for now I'll just say that Liz told my mother that the Mackenzie Fund was too good to be true. This might have been around the time Mrs. Burkett died, I'm not sure about that, but I know it was before the fall of 2008, when the economy went belly up. Including our part of it. Uncle Harry used to play racquetball at some fancy club near Pier 90 where the big boats dock. One of the friends he played with was a Broadway producer who told him about the Mackenzie Fund. The friend called it a license to coin money, and Uncle Harry took him seriously about that. Why wouldn't he? The friend had produced like a bazillion musicals that ran on Broadway for a bazillion years, plus also all over the country, and the royalties just poured in. I knew exactly what royalties were. I was a literary agent's kid. Uncle Harry checked it out, talked to some big bug who worked for the fund, although not to James Mackenzie himself, because Uncle Harry was just a small bug in the great scheme of things, and put in a bunch off an A. The returns were so good that he put in more. And more. When he got the Alzheimer's and he went downhill really fast, my mother took over all the accounts, and she not only stuck with the Mackenzie Fund, she put even more money into it. Monty Grisham, the lawyer who helped with contracts back then, not only told her not to put in more, he told her to get out while the getting was good. That was the other warning she got, and not long after she took over the Conklin agency. He also said that if a thing looked too good to be true, it probably was. I'm telling you everything I found out in little driblets and drablets, like that overheard conversation between Mom and her editor pal. I'm sure you get that, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that the Mackenzie Fund was actually a big fat Ponzi scheme. The way it worked was Mackenzie and his merry band of thieves took in mega millions and paid back big percentage returns while skimming off most of the investment dough. They kept it going by roping in new investors, telling each one how special he or she was because only a select few were allowed into the fund. The select few, it turned out, were thousands. Everyone from Broadway producers to wealthy widows who stopped being wealthy almost overnight. A scheme like that depends on investors being happy with their returns, and not only leaving their initial investments in the fund but putting in more. It worked okay for a while, but when the economy crashed in 2008, almost everybody in the fund asked for their money back and the money wasn't there. Mackenzie was a piker compared to Madoff, the king of Ponzi schemes, but he gave old Byrne a run for his money. After taking in over $20 billion, all he had in the Mackenzie accounts was a measly $15 million. He went to jail, which was satisfying, but as Mom sometimes said, grits ain't groceries and revenge don't pay the bills. We're okay, she told me when Mackenzie started showing up on all the news channels and in the Times. Don't worry, Jamie. But the circles under her eyes said that she was plenty worried, and she had plenty of reasons to be. Here's more of what I found out later. Mom only had about 200 grand in assets she could put her hands on, and that included the insurance policies on her and me. What she had on the liability side of the ledger, you don't want to know. Just remember our apartment was on Park Avenue, the agency office was on Madison Avenue, and the extended care home where Uncle Harry was living, if you can call that living, I can hear me mother adding, was in Pound Ridge, which is about as expensive as it sounds. Closing the office on Madison was Mom's first move. After that she worked out of the Palace on Park, at least for a while. She paid some rent in advance by cashing in those insurance policies I mentioned, including her brother's, but that would only last 8 or 10 months. She rented Uncle Harry's place in Spionk. She sold the Range Rover. We don't really need a car in the city anyway, Jamie, she said, and a bunch of first edition books, including a signed Thomas Wolfe of Look Homeward, Angel. She cried over that one and said she didn't get half of what it was worth because the rare book market was also in the toilet, thanks to a bunch of sellers as desperate for cash as she was. Our Andrew Wyeth painting went too. And every day she cursed James Mackenzie for the thieving, money-grubbing, motherfucking, cocksucking, bleeding hemorrhoid on legs they was. Sometimes she also cursed Uncle Harry, saying he'd be living behind a garbage dumpster by the end of the year and it would serve him right. And, to be fair, later on she cursed herself for not listening to Liz and Monty. I feel like the grasshopper who played all summer instead of working, she said to me one night. January or February of 2009, I think. By then Liz was staying over sometimes, but not that night. That might have been the first time I noticed there were threads of grey in my mom's pretty red-haired, or maybe I remember because she started to cry and it was my turn to comfort her, even though I was just a little kid and didn't really know how to do it. That summer we moved out of the Palace on Park and into a much smaller place on 10th Avenue. Not a dump, Mom said, and the price is right. Also, I'll be damned if I'll move out of the city. That would be waving the white flag. I'd start losing clients. The agency moved with us, of course. The office was in what I suppose would have been my bedroom if things hadn't been so fucking dire. My room was an alcove adjacent to the kitchen. It was hot in the summer and cold in the winter, but at least it smelled good. I think it used to be the pantry. She moved Uncle Harry to a facility in Bayonne. The less said about that place the better. The only good thing about it, I suppose, was that poor old Uncle Harry didn't know where he was. Anyway, he would have Mercedes pants just as much if he'd been in the Beverly Hilton. Other things I remember about 2009 and 2010, my mother stopped getting her hair done. She stopped lunching with friends and only lunched with clients of the agency if she really had to, because she was the one who always got stuck with the check. She didn't buy many new clothes, and the ones she did buy were from discount stores. And she started drinking more wine. A lot more. There were nights when she and her friend Liz, the Regis Thomas fan and detective I told you about, would get pretty soused together. The next day Mom would be red-eyed and snappy, puttering around in her office in her pajamas. Sometimes she'd sing, "Crappy days are here again, the skies are fucking drear again." On those days it was airleaf to go to school. A public school, of course. My private school days were over, thanks to James Mackenzie. There were a few rays of light in all that gloom. The rare book market might have been in the shithouse, but people were reading regular books again, novels to escape and self-help books because, let's face it, in 2009 and 10, a lot of people needed to help themselves. Mom was always a big mystery reader, and she had been building up that part of the Conklin stable ever since taking over for Uncle Harry. She had 10 or maybe even a dozen mystery authors. They weren't big-ticket guys and gals, but their 15% brought in enough to pay the rent and keep the lights on in our new place. Plus, there was Jane Reynolds, a librarian from North Carolina. Her novel, a mystery titled Dead Red, came in over the transom, and Mom just raved about it. There was an auction for who would get to publish it. All the big companies took part, and the rights ended up selling for $2 million. 300,000 of those scoots were ours, and my mother began to smile again. It will be a long time before we get back to Park Avenue, she said, and we've got a lot of climbing to do before we get out of the hole Uncle Harry dug for us, but we just might make it. I don't want to go back to Park Avenue anyway, I said. I like it there. She smiled and hugged me. You're my little love. She held me at arm's length and studied me. Not so little anymore, either. Do you know what I'm hoping, kiddo? I shook my head that Jane Reynolds turns out to be a bouquet-year babe. And that the movie of Dead Red gets made. Even if neither of those things happen, there's good old Regis Thomas and his Roanoke saga. He's the jewel in our crown. Only Dead Red turned out to be like a final flash of sunlight before a big storm moves in. The movie never got made, and the publishers who Biden the book got it wrong, as they sometimes do. The book flopped, which did hurt us financially. The money was paid, but other stuff happened and that 300 grand vanished like dust in the wind. First, Mom's wisdom teeth went to hell and got infected. She had to have them all pulled. That was bad. Then Uncle Harry, troublesome Uncle Harry, still not 50 years old, tripped in the Bayonne care facility and fractured his skull. That was a lot worse. Mom talked to the lawyer who helped her with book contracts, and took a healthy bite of our agency fee for his trouble. He recommended another lawyer who specialized in liability and negligence suits. That lawyer Sideway had a good case, and maybe we did, but before the case got anywhere near a courtroom, the Bayonne facility declared bankruptcy. The only one who made money out of that was the fancy slip-and-fall lawyer, who banked just shy of $40,000. Those billable hours are a bitch, Mom said one night when she and Liz Dutton were well into their second bottle of wine. Liz laughed because it wasn't her 40,000. Mom laughed because she was squiffed. I was the only one who didn't see the humor in it, because it wasn't just Thellowire's bills. We were on the hook for Uncle Harry's medical bills as well. Worst of all, the IRS came after Mom for back taxes Uncle Harry owed. He had been putting off that other Uncle Sam so he could dump more money into the Mackenzie Fund. Which left Regis Thomas the jewel in our crown. Chapter 7. Now check this out. It's the fall of 2009. Obama is president, and the economy is slowly getting better. For us, not so much. I'm in the 3rd grade, and Ms. Pierce has me doing a fractions problem on the board because I'm good at shit like that. I mean, I was doing percentages when I was 7, literary agent skid, remember? The kids behind me are restless because it's that funny little stretch of school between Thanksgiving and Christmas. The problem is AC as soft butter on toast, and I'm just finishing when Mr. Hernandez, the assistant principal, sticks his head in. He and Ms. Pierce have a brief murmured conversation, and then Ms. Pierce asks me to step out into the hall and why Mother is waiting out there, and she's as pale as a glass of milk, skim milk. My first thought is that Uncle Harry, who now has a steel platy in his skull to protect his useless brain, has died. Which in a gruesome way would actually be good, because it would cut down on expenses. But when I ask, she says Uncle Harry, by then living in a third-rate care home in Piscataway, he kept moving further west, like some fucked-up brain-dead pioneer, is fine. Mom hustles me down the hall and out the door before I can ask any more questions. Parked at the yellow curb where parents drop off their kids and pick them up in the afternoon is a Ford sedan with a bubble light on the dash. Standing beside it in a blue parka with NYPD on the breast is Liz Dutton. Mom is rushing me toward the car, but I dig in my heels and make her stop. What is it? I ask. Tell me. I'm not crying, but the tears are close. There's been a lot of bad news since we found out about the Mackenzie Fund, and I don't think I can stand any more, but I get some. Regis Thomas is dead. The jewel just fell out of our crown. Chapter 8. I have to stop here and tell you about Regis Thomas. My mother used to say that most writers are as weird as turds that glow in the dark, And Mr. Thomas was a case in point. The Roanoke Saga, that's what he called it, consisted of 9 books when he died, each one as thick as a brick. Old Regis always serves up a heaping helping, Mom said once. When I was 8, I snitched a copy off the first one, Death Swamp of Roanoke, off one of the office shelves and read it. No problem there. I was as good at reading as I was at math and seeing dead folks. It's not bragging if it's true. Plus Death Swamp wasn't exactly Finnegan's Wake. I'm not saying it was badly written, don't get that idea. The man could tell a tale. There was plenty of adventure, lots of scary scenes, especially in Death Swamp, a search for buried treasure, and a big hot helping off good old sex. I learned more about the true meaning of 6 to 9 in that book than a kid of 8 should probably know. I learned something else as well, although I only made a conscious connection later. It was about all those nights Mom's friend Liz stayed over. I'd say there was a sex scene every 50 pages or so in Death Swamp, including one in a tree while hungry alligators crawled around beneath. We're talking 50 Shades of Roanoke. In my early teens, Regis Thomas taught me to jack off, and if that's too much information, deal with it. The books really were a saga, in that they told one continuing story with a cast of continuing characters. They were strong men with fair hair and laughing eyes, untrustworthy men with shifty eyes, noble Indians, who in later books became noble Native Americans, and gorgeous women with firm, high breasts. Everyone, the good, the bad, the firm-breasted, was Randy all the time. The heart of the series, what kept the readers coming back, other than the duels, murders, and sex, that is, was the titanic secret that had caused all the Roanoke settlers to disappear. Had it been the fault of George Threadgill, the chief villain? Were the settlers dead? Was there really an ancient city beneath Roanoke full of ancient wisdom? What did Martin Betancourt mean when he said time is the key before expiring? What did that cryptic word Croatoan, found carved on a palisade of the abandoned community, really mean? Millions of readers slavered to know the answers to those questions. To anyone far in the future finding that hard to believe, I'd simply tell you to hunt up something by Judith Krantz or Harold Robbins. Millions of people read their stuff, too. Regis Thomas's characters were classic projection. Or maybe I mean wish fulfillment. He was a little wizened dude whose author photo was routinely altered to make his face look a little less like a lady's leather purse. He didn't come to New York City because he couldn't. The guy who wrote about fearless men hacking their way through pestilent swamps, fighting duels, and having athletic sex under the stars was an agoraphobic bachelor who lived alone. He was also incredibly paranoid, so said Mimatha, about his work. No one saw it until it was done, and after the first 2 volumes were such rip-roaring successes, staying at the top of the bestseller lists for months, that included a copy editor. He insisted that they be published as he wrote them, word for golden word. He wasn't a book-a-year author, that literary agent's El Dorado, but he was dependable. A book with of Roanoke in the title would appear every 2 or 3 years. The first 4 came during Uncle Harry's tenure, the next 5 in Mom's. That included Ghost Maiden of Roanoke, which Thomas announced was the penultimate volume. The last book in the series, he promised, would answer all the questions his loyal readers had been asking ever since those first expeditions into the Death Swamp. It would also be the longest book in the series, maybe 700 pages, which would allow the publisher to tack an extra $1 or $2 onto the purchase price. And once Roanoke and all its mysteries were put to rest, he had confided to my mother on one of her visits to his upstate New York compound, he intended to begin a multi-volume series focused on the Mary Celeste. It all sounded good until he dropped dead at his desk with only 30 or so pages of his magnum opus completed. He had been paid a cool $3 million in advance, but with no book, the advance would have to be paid back, including our share. Only our share was either gone or spoken for. This, as you may have guessed, was where I came in. Okay, back to the story. Chapter 9. As we approached the unmarked police car, I knew what it was. I'd seen it lots of times, Parked in front of our building with the sign reading "Polizeiofficer on call" on the dash, Liz held open the side of her parka to show me her empty shoulder holster. This was a kind of joke between us. No guns around my son, that was Mom's hard and fast rule. Liz always showed me the empty holster when she was wearing it, and I'd seen it plenty of times on the coffee table in our living room. Also on the night table on the side of the bed my mother didn't use, and by the age of 9, I had a pretty good idea of what that meant. Death Swamp of Roanoke included some steamy stuff going on between Laura Goodhue and Purity Betancourt, the widow of Martin Betancourt. Pure she wasn't. What's she doing here? I asked Mom when we got to the car. Liz was right there, so I guess it was an impolite thing to say, if not downright rude, but I had just been jerked out of class and been told before we even got outside that our meal ticket had been revoked. Get in, champ, Liz said. She always called me champ. Time's a wasting. I don't want to. We're having fish sticks for lunch. Nope, Liz said, we're having Whoppers and fries. I'm buying. Get in, my mother said. Please, Jamie. So I got in the back. There were a couple of Taco Bell wrappers on the floor and a smell that might have been microwave popcorn. There was also another smell, one I associated with our visits to Uncle Harry in his various care homes, but at least there was no metal grill between the back and the front, like I'd seen on some of the police shows Mom watched. She was partial to the wire. Mom got in front and Liz pulled out, pausing at the first red light to turn on the dashboard flasher. It went blip blip blip, and even without any siren, cars moved out of her way and we were on the FDR lickety-dash-split, and my mother turned around and looked at me from between the seats with an expression that scared me. She looked desperate. Could he be at his house, Jamie? I'm sure they've taken his body away to the morgue or the funeral parlor, but could he still be there? The answer to that was I didn't know, but I didn't say that or anything else at first. I was too amazed. And hurt. Maybe even mad, I don't remember for sure about that, but the amazement and hurt I remember very well. She had told me never to tell anybody about seeing dead people, and Aniva had, but then she did. She told Liz. That was why Liz was here, and would soon be using her blipping dashboard light to shift traffic out of our way on the Sprainbrook Parkway to T. Last I said, how long has she known? I saw Liz wink at me in the rearview mirror, the kind of wink that Sideway got a secret. I didn't like it. It was Mom and me who were supposed to have the secret. Mom reached over the seat and grasped me by the wrist, her hand was cold. Never mind that, Jamie, just tell me if he could still be there. Yeah, I guess. If that's where he died. Mom let go of me and told Liz to go faster, but Liz shook her head. Not a good idea. We might pick up a police escort, and they'd want to know what the big deal was. Am I supposed to tell them we need to talk to a dead guy before he disappears? I could tell by the way she said it that shedded tea believe a word of what Mom had told her. She was just humoring her, joshing her along. That was okay with me. As for Mom, I don't think she cared what Liz thought, as long as she got us to Croton-on-Hudson as fast as you can, then. Roger that, TT. I never liked her calling Mom that. It's what some kids in my class called having to go to the bathroom, but Mom didn't seem to mind. On that day she wouldn't have cared if Liz called her Bonnie Boobs a lot. Probably wouldn't even have noticed. Some people can keep secrets and some people can't, I said. I couldn't help myself. So I guess I was mad. Stop it, my mother said. I can't afford to have you sulking. I'm not sulking, I said sulkily. I knew she and Liz were tight, but she and I were supposed to be even tighter. She could have at least asked me what I thought about the idea before spilling our greatest secret some night when she and Liz were in bed after climbing what Regis Thomas called the ladder of passion. I can see you're upset, and you can be pissed off at me later, but right now I need you, kiddo. It was like she had forgotten Liz was there, but I could see Liz's eyes in the rearview mirror and knew she was listening to every word. Okay. She was scaring me a little. Chill, Mom. She ran her hand through her hair and gave her bangs a yank for good measure. This is so unfair. Everything that's happened to us, that's still happening, is so fucking fucked up. She ruffled my hair. You didn't hear that? Yes, I did, I said. Because I was still mad, but she was right. Remember what I said about being in a Dickens novel, only with swears? You know why people read books like that? Because they're so happy that fucked up shit isn't happening to them. I've been juggling bills for 2 years now and never dropped a single one. Sometimes I had to let the little ones go to pay the big ones. Sometimes I let the big ones go to pay a bunch of little ones, but the lights stayed on and we never missed a meal. Right. Yeah, I said, thinking it might raise a smile. It didn't, but now, she gave her bangs another yank, leaving them all clumpy. Now 6 things have come due at once, with goddamn infernal revenue leading the pack. I'm drowning in a sea of red ink and I was expecting Regis to save me. Then the son of a bitch dies. At the age of 59. Who dies at 59 if they're not 100 pounds overweight or using drugs? People with cancer. I said. Mom gave a watery snort and yanked her poor bangs easy. Liz murmured. She laid her palm against the side of Mom's neck, but I don't think Mom felt it. The book could save us. The book, the whole book, and nothing but the book. She gave a wild laugh that scared me even more. I know he only had a couple of chapters done, but nobody else knows it, because he didn't talk to anybody but my brother before Harry got sick and now me. He didn't outline or keep notes, Jamie, because he said it straight-jacketed the creative process. Also because he didn't have to. He always knew where he was going. She took my wrist again and squeezed so hard she left bruises. I saw them later that night. He still might know chapter 10. We did the drive-through at the Tarrytown Burger King, and I got a Whopper as promised. Also a chocolate shake. Mom didn't want to stop, but Liz insisted. He's a growing boy, T. He needs chow even if you don't. I liked her for that, and there were other things I liked her for, but there were also things I didn't like. Big things. I'll get to that, I'll have to, but for now let's just say my feelings about Elizabeth Dutton, Detective 2nd Grade NYPD, were complicated. She said one other thing before we got to Croton-on-Hudson, and I need to mention it. She was just making conversation, but it turned out to be important later. I know, that word again. Liz said Thumper had finally killed someone. The man who called himself Thumper had been on the local news every now and then over the last few years, especially on NY1, which Mom watched most nights while she was making supper, and sometimes while we were eating, if it had been an interesting news day. Thumper's reign of terror, thanks, NY1, had actually been going on even before I was born, and he was sort of an urban legend. You know, like Slender Man or The Hook, only with explosives. Who? I said. Who did he kill? How long until we get there? Mom asked. She had no interest in Thumper. She had her own fish to fry, a guy who made the mistake of trying to use one of Manhattan's few remaining phone booths, Liz said, ignoring my mother. Bomb squad thinks it went off the second he lifted the receiver. 2 sticks of dynamite. Do we have to talk about this? Mom asked. And why is every goddamn light red? 2 sticks of dynamite taped under the little ledge where people can put their change, Liz went on, undeterred. Thumper's a resourceful SOB, got to give him that. They're going to crank up another task force. This will be the 3rd since 1996, and I'm going to try for it. I was on the last one, so I've got a shot, and I can use the OT. Lights green, Mom said. Go. Liz went. Chapter 11. I was still eating a few last French fries, cold by then, but I didn't mind, when we turned onto a little dead-end street called Cobblestone Lane. There might have been cobblestones on it once, but now it was just smooth tar. The house at the end of it was Cobblestone Cottage. It was a big stone house with fancy carved shutters and moss on the roof. You heard me, moss. Crazy, right? There was a gate, but it was open. There were signs on the gateposts, which were the same grey stone as the house. One said, "Do not trespass, we are tired of hiding the bodies." The other showed Asnerling German Shepherd and said beware attack dog. Liz stopped and looked at my mother, eyebrows raised. The only body Regis ever buried was his pet parakeet, Francis, Mom said. Named after Francis Drake, the explorer. And he never had a dog. Allergies, I said from the back seat. Liz drove up to the house, stopped, and turned off the blippy dashboard light. Garage doors are shut and I see no cars. Who's here? Nobody, Mom said. The housekeeper found him. Mrs. Quayle Davina. She and a part-time gardener were the whole staff. Nice woman, she called me right after she called for an ambulance. Ambulance made me wonder if she was sure he was really dead, and she said she was, because she worked in a nursing home before coming to work for Regis, but he still had to go to the hospital first. I told her to go home as soon as the body was removed. She was pretty freaked out. She asked about Frank Wilcox, he's Regis's business manager, and I said I'd get in touch with him. In time I will, but the last time I spoke to Regis, he told me Frank and his wife were in Greece. Press? Liz asked. He was a best-selling writer. Jesus God, I don't know. Mom looked around wildly, as if expecting to see reporters hiding in the bushes. I don't see any. They may not even know yet, Liz said. If they do, if they heard it on a scanner, they'll go after the cops and EMTs first. The body's not here, so the story's not here. We've got some time, so calm down. I'm staring bankruptcy in the face. I've got a brother who may live in a home for the next 30 years, and a boy who might like to go to college someday, so don't tell me to calm down. Jamie, do you see him? You know what he looks like, right? Tell me you see him. I know what he looks like, but I don't see him, I said. Mom groaned and slapped the heel of her palm against her poor clumped-up bangs that I grabbed for the door handle, and surprise, surprise, there wasn't one. I told Liz to let me out and she did. We all got out. Knock on the door, Liz said. If no one answers, we'll go around and boost Jamie up so he can look in the windows. We could do that because the shutters, with fancy little ornamental doodads carved into them, were all open. My mother ran to try the door, and for the moment Liz and I were alone. You don't really think you can see dead people like the kid in that movie, do you, champ? I didn't care if she believed me or not, but something about her tone, as if this was all a big joke, pissed me off. Mom told you about Mrs. Burkett's rings, didn't she? Liz shrugged. That might have been a lucky guess. You didn't happen to see any dead folks on the way here, did you? I said no, but it can be hard to tell unless you talk to them, or they talk to you. Once when me and Mom were on the bus, I saw a girl with cuts in her wrists so deep they looked like red bracelets, and I was pretty sure she was dead, although she was nowhere near as gauche as the Central Parkman. And just that day, as we drove out of the city, I spotted an old woman in a pink bathrobe standing on the corner of 8th Avenue. When the sign turned to walk, she just stood there, looking around like a tourist. She had those roller things in her hair. She might have been dead, but she also might have been a live person just wandering around, the way Mom said Uncle Harry used to do sometimes before she had to put him in that first care home. Mom told me that when Uncle Harry started doing that, sometimes in his PJs, she gave up thinking he might get better. Fortune tellers guess lucky all the time, Liz said. And there's an old saying about how even a stopped clock is right twice a day. So you think my mother's crazy and I'm helping her be crazy? She laughed. That's called enabling, champ, and no, I don't think that. What I think is she's upset and grasping at straws. Do you know what that means? Yeah. That she's crazy. Liz shook her head again, more emphatically this time. She's under a lot of stress. I totally get it. But making things up won't help her. I hope you get that. Mom came back. No answer, and the door's locked. I tried it. Okay, Liz said. Let's go window peeking. We walked around the house. I could look in the dining room windows because they went all the way to the ground, but I was too short for most of the other ones. Liz made a hand step so I could look into those. I saw a big living room with a widescreen TV and lots of fancy furniture. I saw a dining room with a table long enough to seat the starting team of the Mets, plus maybe their bullpen pitchers. Which was crazy for a guy who hated company. I saw a room that Mom called the small parlor, and around back was the kitchen. Mr. Thomas wasn't in any of the rooms, maybe he's upstairs. I've never been up there, but if he died in bed, or in the bathroom, he might still be. I doubt if died on the throne, like Elvis, but I suppose it's possible. That made me laugh. Calling the toilet the throne always made mellow, but I stopped when I saw Mom's face. This was serious business, and she was losing hope. There was a kitchen door, and she tried the knob, but it was locked, just like the front door. She turned to Liz. Maybe we could. Don't even think about it, Liz said. No way are we breaking in. I've got enough problems at the department without setting off a recently deceased best-selling author's security system and trying to explain what we're doing here when the guys from Brinks or ADT show up. Or the local cops. And speaking of the cops, he died alone, right? The housekeeper found him? Yes, Mrs. Quayle. She called me. I told you that the cops will want to ask her some questions. Probably doing it right now. Or maybe the medical examiner. I don't know how they do things in Westchester County. Because he's famous. Because they think someone might have murdered him. Because it's routine. And yeah, because he's famous, I suppose. The point is, I'd like for us to be gone when they show up. Mom's shoulders slumped. Nothing, Jamie. No sign of him. I shook my head. Mom sighed and looked at Liz. Maybe we should check the garage? Liz gave her a shrug that said, it's your party, Jamie. What do you think? I couldn't imagine why Mr. Thomas would be hanging out in his garage, but I guessed it was possible. Maybe he had a favorite car. I guess Westhold. As long as we're here. We started for the garage, but then I stopped. There was a gravel path beyond Mr. Thomas's swimming pool, which had been drained. The path was lined with trees, but because it was late in the season and most of the leaves were gone, I could see a little green building. I pointed to it. What's that? Mom gave her forehead another slap. I was starting to worry she might give herself a brain tumor, or something. Oh my God, la petite maison dans les bois. Why didn't I think of it first? What's that? I asked. His study. Where he writes. If he's anywhere, it would there. Comion. She grabbed my hand and ran me around the shallow end of the pool, but when we got to where the gravel path started, I set my feet and stopped. Mom kept going, and if Liz hadn't grabbed me by the shoulder, I probably would have face-planted. Mom? Mom. She turned around, looking impatient. Except that's not the right word. She looked halfway to crazy. Come on. I'm telling you, if he's anywhere here, it will be there. You need to calm down, Liz said. We'll check out his writing cabin, and then I think we should go. Mom. My mother ignored me. She was starting to cry, which she hardly ever did. She didn't do it even when she found out how much the IRS wanted. That day she just pounded her fists on her desk and called them a bunch of blood-sucking bastards, but she was crying now. You go if you want, but we're staying here until Jamie's sure it's a bust. This might be just a pleasure jaunt for you, humoring the crazy lady. That's unfair. But this is my life we're talking about. I know that, and Jamie's life. And one of the worst things about being a kid, maybe the very worst, is how grown-ups ignore you when they get going on their shit. Liz. Bot off you. Stop. They stopped. They looked at me. There we stood, two women and a little boy in a New York Mets hoodie, beside a drained pool on an overcast November day. I pointed to the gravel path leading to the little house in the woods where Mr. Thomas wrote his Roanoke books. He's right there, I said. Chapter 12. He came walking toward us, which didn't surprise me. Most of them, not all but most, are attracted to living people for a while, like bugs to a bug light. That's kind of a horrible way to put it, but it's all I can think of. I would have known he was dead even if I didn't know he was dead, because of what he was wearing. It was a chilly day, but he was dressed in a plain white tee, baggy shorts, and those strappy sandals Mom calls Jesus shoes. Plus there was something else, something weird, a yellow sash with a blue ribbon pinned to it. Liz was saying something to my mother about how there was no one there and I was just pretending, but I paid no attention. I pulled free of Mom's hand and walked toward Mr. Thomas. He stopped. "Hello, Mr. Thomas," I said. "I'm Jamie Conklin, Tia's son. I've never met you." "Oh, come on," Liz said from behind me. "Be quiet," Mom said, but some of Liz's skepticism must have gotten through, because she asked me if I was sure Mr. Thomas was really there. I ignored this, too. I was curious about the sash he was wearing. "Had been wearing when he died. I was at my desk," he said. "I always wear my sash when I'm writing. It's my good luck charm." "What's the blue ribbon for?" "The regional spelling bee I won when I was in the 6th grade spelled down kids from 20 other schools. I lost in the state competition, but I got this blue ribbon for the regional. My mother made the sash and pinned the ribbon on it. In my opinion, I thought that was sort of a weird thing to still be wearing, since 6th grade must have been a zillion years ago for Mr. Thomas, but he said it without any embarrassment or self-consciousness. "Some dead people can feel love. Remember me telling you about Mrs. Burkett kissing Mr. Burkett's cheek? And they can feel hate, something I found out in due time, but most of the other emotions seem to leave when they die. Even the love never seemed all that strong to me. I don't like to tell you this, but hate stays stronger and lasts longer. I think when people see ghosts, as opposed to dead people, it's because they are hateful. People think ghosts are scary because they are. I turned back to Mom and Liz. "Mom, did you know Mr. Thomas wears a sash when he writes?" Her eyes widened. "That was in the salon interview he did 5 or 6 years ago. He's wearing it now?" "Yeah. It's got a blue ribbon on it. From the spelling bee he won. In the interview, he laughed and called it miserly affectation." "Maybe so," Mr. Thomas said, "but most writers have silly affectation and superstitions. We're like baseball players that way, Jimmy. And who can argue with 9 straight New York Times bestsellers?" "I'm Jamie," I said. Liz said, "You told Champ there about the interview, T. Must have. Or he read it himself. He's a hell of a good reader. He knew, that's all, and he'd be quiet," my mother said fiercely. Liz raised her hands, like surrendering. Mom stepped up beside me, looking at what to her was just a gravel path with nobody on it. Mr. Thomas was standing right in front of her with his hands in the pockets of his shorts. They were loose, and I hoped he wouldn't push down on his pockets too hard, because it looked to me like he wasn't wearing any undies. "Tell him what I told you to tell him." What Mom wanted me to tell him was that he had to help us or the thin financial ice we'd been walking on for a year or more was going to break and we'd drown in a sea of debt. Also that the agency had begun to bleed clients because some of her writers knew we were in trouble and might be forced to close. Rats deserting a sinking ship was what she called them one night when Liz wasn't there and Mom was into her 4th glass of wine. I didn't bother with all that blah blah blah, though. Dead people have tones were your questions, at least until they disappear, and they have to tell the truth. So I just cut to the chase. Mom wants to know what the secret of Roanoke is about. She wants to know the whole story. "Do you know the whole story, Mr. Thomas?" "Of course." He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, and now I could see a little line of hair running down the middle of his stomach from below his navel. I didn't want to see that, but I did. I always have everything before I write anything. And keep it all in your head. I have to. Otherwise someone might steal it. Put it on the internet, spoil the surprises. If he'd been alive, that might have come out sounding paranoid. Dead, he was just stating a fact, or what he believed was a fact. And hey, I though there had a point. Computer trolls were always spilling stuff on the net, everything from boring shit like political secrets to the really important things, Like what was going to happen in the season finale of Fringe. Liz walked away from me and Mom, sat on one of the benches beside the pool, crossed her legs, and lit a cigarette. She had apparently decided to let the lunatics run the asylum. That was okay with me. Liz had her good points, but that morning she was basically in the way. Mom wants you to tell me everything, I said to Mr. Thomas. I'll tell her, and she'll write the last Roanoke book. She'll say you sent her almost all of it before you died, along with notes about how to finish the last couple of chapters. Alive, he would have howled at the idea of someone else finishing his book. His work was the most important thing in his life and he was very possessive of it. But now the rest of him was lying on a mortician's table somewhere, dressed in the khaki shorts and the yellow sash he'd been wearing as he wrote his last few sentences. The version of him talking tone was no longer jealous or possessive of his secrets. Can she do that? Was all he asked. Mom had assured me, and Liz, on the way out to Cobblestone Cottage, that she really could do that. Regis Thomas insisted that no copy editor should sully a single one of his precious words, but in fact Mom had been copyediting his books for years without telling him, even back when Uncle Harry was still in his right mind and running the business. Some of the changes were pretty big, but he never knew, or at least never said anything. If anyone in the world could copy Mr. Thomas's style, it was Mimother. But style wasn't the problem. The problem was story. She can, I said, because it was simpler than telling him all of that. Who is that other woman? Mr. Thomas asked, pointing at Liz. That's my mother's friend. Her name is Liz Dutton. Liz looked up briefly, then lit another cigarette. Are she and your mother fucking? Mr. Thomas asked. As pretty sure, yeah. I thought so. It's how they look at each other. What did he say? Mom asked anxiously. He asked if you and Liz were close friends, I said. Kind of lame, but all I could think of on the spur of the moment. So will you tell us the secret of Roanoke? I asked Mr. Thomas. I mean the whole book, not just the secret part. Yes. He says yes, I told Mom, and she took both her phone and a little tape recorder out of her bag. She didn't want to miss a single word. Tell him to be as detailed as he can. Mom says to be. I heard her, Mr. Thomas said. I'm dead, not deaf. His shorts were lower than ever. Cool, I said. Listen, maybe you better pull up your shorts, Mr. Thomas, or your willy's gonna get chilly. He pulled up his shorts so they hung off his bony hips. Is it chilly? It doesn't feel that way to me. Then, with no change in tone, Tia is starting to look old, Jimmy. I didn't bother to tell him again that my name was Jamie. Instead I looked at my mother and holy God, she did look old. Was starting to anyway. When had that happened? Tell us the story, I said. Begin at the beginning. Where else? Mr. Thomas said. Chapter 13. It took an hour and a half, and by the time we were done, I was exhausted and I think Mom was, too. Mr. Thomas looked just the same at the end as when we started, standing there with that somehow sorry yellow sash falling down over his poochy belly and low-slung shorts. Liz parked her car between the gateposts with the dashboard light blipping, which was probably a good idea, because the news of Mr. Thomas's death had begun to spread, and people were showing up out front to snap pictures of Cobblestone Cottage. Once she came back to ask how much longer we'd been, Mom just waved her off, told her to inspect the grounds or something, but mostly Liz hung in. It was stressful as well as exhausting, because our future depended on Mr. Thomas's book. It wasn't fair for me to have to bear the weight of that responsibility, not at 9, but there was no choice. I had to repeat everything Mr. Thomas said to Mom, or rather to Mom's recording devices, and Mr. Thomas had plenty to say. When he told me he was able to keep everything in his head, he wasn't just blowing smoke. And Mom kept asking questions, mostly for clarification. Mr. Thomas didn't seem to mind, didn't seem to care one way or the other, actually, but the way Mom was dragging things out started bugging the shit out of me. Also, my mouth got wickedly dry. When Liz brought me her leftover Coke from Burger King, I gulped down the few swallows that were left and gave her a hug. "Thank you," I said, handing back the paper cup. "I needed that." "Very welcome." Liz had stopped looking bored. Now she looked thoughtful. She couldn't see Mr. Thomas, and I don't think she still totally believed he was there, but she knew something was going on, because she'd heard a 9-year-old boy spieling out a complicated plot featuring half a dozen major characters and at least 24 minor ones. Oh, and a threesome, under the influence of bulbous canary grass supplied by a helpful Native American of the Nottoway people, consisting of George Threadgill, Purity Betancourt, and Laura Goodhue, who ended up getting pregnant. Poor Laura always got the shitty end of the stick. At the end of Mr. Thomas's summary, the big secret came out, and it was a dilly. I'm not going to tell you what it was. Read the book and find out for yourself. If you haven't read it already, that is. Now I'll tell you the last sentence, Mr. Thomas said. He seemed as fresh as ever, although fresh is probably the wrong word to use with a dead person. His voice had started to fade, though. Just a little. Because I always write that first. It's the beacon I row to. Last sentence coming up, I told Mom thank God, she said. Mr. Thomas raised one finger, like an old-time actor getting ready to give his big speech. On that day, a red sun went down over the deserted settlement, and the carved word that would puzzle generations glowed as I flamed in blood, Croatoan. Tell her Croatoan in capital letters, Jimmy. I told her, although I didn't know exactly what limned in blood meant, then asked Mr. Thomas if we were done. Just as he said we were, I heard a brief siren from out front, 2 whoops and a blat. "Oh God," Liz said, but not in a panicky way, more like she had been expecting it. "Here we go." She had her badge clipped to her belt and unzipped her parka so it would show. Then she went out front and came back with 2 cops. They were also wearing parkas, with Westchester County Police patches on them. "Cheese it, the cops," Mr. Thomas said, which I didn't understand at all. Later, when I asked Mom, she told me it was slang from the olden days of the 1950s. "This is Ms. Conklin," Liz said. "She's my friend and was Mr. Thomas's agent. She asked me to run her up here, because she was concerned someone might take the opportunity to steal souvenirs. Or manuscripts," my mother added. The little tape recorder was safe in her bag and her phone was in the back pocket of her jeans. One in particular, the last book in a cycle of novels Mr. Thomas was writing. Liz gave her a look that said enough, already, but my mother continued, "He just finished it, and millions of people will want to read it. I felt it me duty to make sure they get the chance." The cops didn't seem all that interested. They were here to look at the room where Mr. Thomas had died. Also to make sure the people who had been observed on the grounds had a good reason to be there. "I believe he died in his study," Mom said, and pointed toward La Petite Maison. One of the cops said. "That's what we heard. We'll check it out." He had to bend down with his hands on his knees to get FaceTime with me. I was pretty shrimpy in those days. "What's your name, son?" "James Conklin." I gave Mr. Thomas a pointed look. "Jamie. This is my mother." I took her hand. "Are you playing hooky today, Jamie?" Before I could answer, Mom cut in, smooth as silk. "I usually pick him up when he gets out of school, but I thought I might not get back in time today, so we swung by to get him." "Didn't we, Liz?" "Roger that," Liz said. "Officers, we didn't check the study, so I can tell you if it's locked or not. Housekeeper left it open with the body inside," the one who'd talked Tome said. "But she gave me her keys and we'll lock up after we have a quick look around." "You might tell them there was no foul play," Mr. Thomas said. I had a heart attack. Hurt like the devil. I was going to tell them no such thing. I was only 9, but that didn't make me stupid. "Is there also a key to the gate?" Liz asked. She was being all pro now because it was open when we arrived. "There is, and we'll lock it when we leave," the second cop said. "Good move parking your car there, detective." Liz spread her hands, as if to say it was all in a day's work. If you reset, we'll get out of your way. The cop who had spoken to me said, we should know what that valuable manuscript looks like so we can make sure it's safe. This was a ball my mother could carry. He sent the original to me just last week. On a thumb drive. I don't think there's another copy. He was pretty paranoid. I was, Mr. Thomas admitted. His shorts were sinking again. Glad you were here to keep an eye out, the second cop said. He and the other one shook hands with Mom and Liz, also with me. Then they started down the gravel path to the little green building where Mr. Thomas had died. Later on I found out a whole lot of writers died at their desks. Must be a type A occupation. Let's go, champ, Liz said. She tried to take my hand, but I wouldn't let her. Go stand over by the swimming pool for a minute, I said. Both of you. Why? Mom asked. I looked at my mother in a way I don't think I ever had before, as if she was stupid. And right then, I thought she was being stupid. Both of them were. Not to mention rude as fuck because you got what you wanted and I need to say thank you. Oh my God, Mom said, and slapped her brow again. What was he thinking? Thank you, Regis. So much. Mom was directing her thank you to a flower bed, so I took her arm and turned her. He's over here, Mom. She said another thank you, to which Mr. Thomas didn't respond. Hedden T seemed to care. Then she walked over to where Liz was standing by their empty pool, lighting another cigarette. I didn't really need to say thank you. By then I knew that dead people don't give much of a shit about things like that, but I said thanks anyway. It was only polite, and besides, I wanted something else. My mom's friend, I said. Liz. Mr. Thomas didn't reply, but he looked at her. She still mostly thinks I'm making it up about seeing you. I mean, she knows something weird happened, because no kid could make up that whole story. By the way, I loved what happened to George Threadgill, thank you. He deserved no better. But she'll work it around in her head so in the end she's got it the way she wants it. She will rationalize. If that's what you call it. It is. Well, is there any way you can show her you're here? I was thinking about how Mr. Burkett scratched his cheek when his wife kissed him. I don't know. Jimmy, do you have any idea what comes next for me? I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas. I don't. I suppose I will find out for myself. He walked toward the pool where he'd never swim again. Someone might fill it when warm weather returned, but by then he would be long gone. Mom and Liz were talking quietly and sharing Liz's cigarette. One of things I didn't like about Liz was how she'd gotten my mother smoking again. Only a little, and only with her, but still. Mr. Thomas stood in front of Liz, drew in a deep breath, and blew it out. Liz didn't have bangs to blow on, her hair was pulled back tight and tied in a ponytail, but she still slitted her eyes the way you will when the wind gusts in your face, and recoiled. She would have fallen into the pool, I think, if Mom hadn't grabbed her. I said, did you feel that? Stupid question, of course she had. That was Mr. Thomas, who was now walking away from us, back toward his study. Thanks again, Mr. Thomas, I called. He didn't turn, but raised a hand to me before putting it back in the pocket of his shorts. I was getting an excellent view of his plumber's crack. That's what Mom called it when she spotted a guy wearing low-riding jeans, and if that's also too much information for you, too bad. We made him tell us in 1 hour everything it had taken him months of thinking to come up with. Didn't he say no, and maybe that gave him the right to show us his ass. Of course I was the only one who could see it.